Hi, welcome to WION Live broadcast. I'm Ollie Barrett in London. These are the headlines. The European Commission launches new legal action against Britain, accusing London of threatening peace in Northern Ireland by trying to overhaul the post-Brexit trade deal. French President Emmanuel Macron says Ukraine needs clear political signals from Europe, as it's reported he may head to Kiev on Thursday. Israel and Egypt will aim to boost natural gas exports to Europe under a memorandum of understanding, as the continent looks to replace Russian energy imports. Global oil prices fall on concerns about fuel demand and economic growth before an expected hike in interest rates by the US Federal Reserve. Hong Kong reports over 1,000 new COVID-19 infections. For the first time, the daily tally has topped the 1,000 mark since mid-April, ahead of celebrations of the 25th anniversary of the city's handover to mainland China. The European Union has launched new legal proceedings against the United Kingdom over its plans to scrap parts of the post-Brexit Northern Ireland Protocol. Boris Johnson's administration published plans earlier this week to make changes to the 2020 deal that it signed with the bloc. The changes relate to the way trade is regulated in the Northern Ireland Protocol.
On Monday, the UK government tabled legislation confirming its intention to unilaterally break international law. More precisely, to break an agreement that protects peace and stability in Northern Ireland, an agreement that we reached together only 2 years ago. Let there be no doubt. There is no legal nor political justification whatsoever for unilaterally changing an international agreement. Opening the door to unilaterally changing an international agreement is a breach of international law as well. So let's call a spade a spade. This is illegal.
Well, London correspondent Sally Patterson joins me live now for more on this. Sally, what legal action is the European Commission actually launching here?
Well, this is actually 3 different bits of legal action. The first of which is actually restarting action that was paused last year, which is over the UK not holding up its obligations to carry out checks on certain goods coming in to Northern Ireland from the UK, from Great Britain. Now, the 2 other bits are new, and one of those is claims by the EU that the UK has not been sharing its data with the EU, and the other part is over them allegedly not setting up checks at the border. So it's actually quite a broad package of legal action that we're going to be seeing. And as you heard there, European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic is put out quite strongly this morning that he says this is illegal, what the UK is doing after what we saw put forward in the UK earlier this week around the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the EU does say that the door is still open, they're still open to dialogue despite launching the legal action. But what we've heard so far from the UK is that any conversation or attempted conversation with the EU just has reached a dead end.
OK, Sally, thank you. Stay where you are for the time being, so I want to get your thoughts on the next story as well. Sally Patterson in London. And the UK insists it will press ahead with a plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite its first scheduled flight being cancelled. It was grounded at the last minute after the European Court of Human Rights issued a ruling to stop the deportation. Only a handful of people were expected to be on the flight last night, local time, but the urgent ECHR ruling that one of the asylum seekers should stay in Britain while a judicial review continues then led to all of the passengers being removed and the flight being called off. The High Court in London is due to hold a judicial review next month to decide on the legality of the scheme. The UK government says it won't be deterred and will prepare for another flight. The Rwandan government says it remains committed to taking in asylum seekers under the scheme. Now, these are migrants who the UK considers to have arrived illegally by crossing the English Channel in small boats from Europe. And let's go back to Sally Patterson now. Sally, what happens next?
Well, really, we're going to be waiting on the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, who is expected to make an announcement in Parliament later today. So hopefully full details of what is planned will come out then. What we do know, as you say, is the government is determined to carry on with its deportation plan. It says it's not going to be put off by what happened yesterday, by the very dramatic events of yesterday, and it's already starting, it says, to plan another flight to Rwanda to take over migrants. Now, the Home Secretary did describe the intervention that we saw on Tuesday as very surprising, and saying many of those removed from this flight will be on the next one. There are some members of Parliament on the Conservative side who are actually wanting to go further, and they are saying the fact that this happened is so outrageous that the UK should in fact withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights altogether. So Conservative MP Greg Smith said, "What last night showed is we now need the same speed and urgency to bring the UK Bill of Rights and remove all power of the European Court of Human Rights over our sovereign decisions." So we're not sure what's going to happen quite yet, but there is definitely the determination to push ahead with this plan.
Sally, thank you. Staying in the UK, and Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has unveiled fresh plans for her government to hold a second Scottish independence vote. She says it can happen without authority from Westminster.
I was re-elected as First Minister just over 1 year ago on a clear commitment to give the people of Scotland the choice of becoming an independent country. And the people of Scotland elected a Scottish Parliament with a decisive majority in favour of both independence and the right to choose. The Scottish Parliament, therefore, has an indisputable democratic mandate.
The last time Scotland held an independence vote was in 2014. Back then, 55% of people voted to remain part of the UK, 45% backed becoming an independent country. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party say the Scottish Government should respect that previous vote. Other opposition leaders say Sturgeon and her party are too obsessed with independence and that there are more important issues to focus on, like the cost of living crisis. Sturgeon is the leader of the pro-independence Scottish National Party, and she is aiming to hold a vote by the end of 2023. The Boris Johnson government says it won't issue a so-called Section 30 order to allow one. Sturgeon says work is underway on how to proceed with the vote, keeping in consideration the probability that London will contest the process.
After everything that has happened, Brexit, COVID, Boris Johnson, it is time to set out a different and better vision. It is time to talk about making Scotland wealthier and fairer. It is time to talk about independence and then to make the choice.
UK officials have issued a heat health alert. Temperatures are set to reach 35 degrees within days. In the southeast of England, hot air has spread up from Spain, Portugal and North Africa. A level 2 alert will be in place for the first time this year from Friday to Sunday. Northern England is currently under a level 1 alert. The meteorological department has issued a warning to stay out of the sun during the middle of the day. That's always a difficult one for Englishmen, and says sunbathers should avoid overdoing it. The latest alert comes at a time when parts of Europe are experiencing a heatwave. It's 40 degrees Celsius in some parts of Spain, and southern France is also seeing extreme temperatures. Brazilian police have made an arrest related to the case of a missing British journalist and an indigenous expert who disappeared in the Amazon. The case of the two missing men is starting to take on the shape of a homicide investigation.
Police in Brazil arrested a second suspect on Tuesday tied to the case of the disappearance of a British journalist and an indigenous expert in the Amazon. What began as a search for the missing men appears to be changing into a homicide investigation. In a statement, Brazil's federal police said that 41-year-old Ozane de Costa de Oliveira, also known as Dos Santos, was under temporary arrest on suspicion he was involved in the case with his brother Amarildo, who was arrested last week. Amarildo, known as Pelado, was arrested in the riverside village of São Gabriel, where the journalist Don Phillips and expert Bruno Pereira were both last seen on June 5th. A police investigator told reporters that Amarildo, quote, did not resist arrest on suspicion of homicide based on witness accounts that placed the two suspects at the supposed scene of the crime. The search for Phillips and Pereira is nearing the end as the area left to search has kept shrinking, according to a spokesman for the indigenous group Univaya, which has been searching non-stop for the men. A lawyer for the group said indigenous searchers tipped off the authorities after discovering traces of the men in the area, helping to focus the search. Pereira, a former head of isolated and recently contacted tribes at Brazil's Indigenous Affairs Agency, was traveling on a research trip with Phillips, a freelance reporter who has written for The Guardian and The Washington Post and was working on a book on the Amazon.
A Cambodian court has ordered jail sentences for nearly 60 opposition figures for conspiring to commit treason. They include prominent American Cambodian lawyer Thierry Seng. Seng's been sentenced to 6 years in jail.
A Cambodian court has handed down jail sentences to about 60 opposition figures for conspiring to commit treason and for incitement, including a prominent Cambodian American lawyer. The mass trial has been widely condemned by the United States and rights groups as politically motivated. The case has involved more than 100 people affiliated with the dissolved Cambodia National Rescue Party. The CNRP was banned and its leader, Kum Sutka, arrested for the country's 2018 election, allowing Prime Minister Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party to win every parliamentary seat, prompting international concern. The charges against Kum Sutka stem from accusations he conspired with the United States to overthrow Hun Sen, who has ruled Cambodia for 37 years. Kum Sutka and Washington reject the accusations. Among those sentenced, American Cambodian lawyer and human rights activist Thierry Seng, who arrived in court on Tuesday dressed as a Statue of Liberty with a symbolic chain around her.
It follows the logic of this autocratic regime to find me guilty. But I am freedom today. I am Lady Liberty. So it won't just be me, Thierry Seng, who will be found guilty, but all the Cambodians who love justice, who love freedom, who are genuine Democrats, who will be found guilty along with us. This autocratic regime is suppressing the Cambodian people. It is suppressing freedom. It is persecuting Cambodians for their political opinions.
A Reuters witness said Sung had not been allowed to appear in court in Phnom Penh due to her attire. Cherry Sung's lawyer Chung Chungi told reporters the court had sentenced her to 6 years in jail and ordered her arrest.
This verdict is not fair. It's unjust for her. It is unjust for her. That was why she was protesting for the solution. But the court did not give the solution. It punished her and jails her instead.
Her lawyer said that she would consider appealing, noting that she and the other co-defendants had been sentenced to between 5 to 8 years in prison. The verdicts are likely to renew international concern about Hun Sen and what his critics say has been elimination over many years of opposition to his rule. Hun Sen denies persecuting his opponents. Human Rights Watch urged foreign governments, the United Nations and aid donors to press Cambodia to quash the convictions and end a broad attack on the country's remaining civic and democratic space.
Russia claims it has destroyed a NATO arms depot in western Ukraine. This as President Volodymyr Zelensky again called on the West to speed up arms deliveries to the war-torn country.
Today the missile strike was inflicted on Lviv and Chernobyl regions, and we keep telling our partners that Ukraine needs modern missile defense systems. Our country does not have them at a sufficient level yet, but it is in our country, and right now it is the greatest need for such weapons in Europe. Therefore, procrastination with its provision cannot be justified.
Russian forces are currently focusing much of their firepower on the strategically important city of Severodonetsk. It's part of Moscow's bid to capture a significant chunk of eastern Ukraine. Regional officials say there are around 500 people hiding inside a chemical factory there. Russian state media claims the people trapped are being used as human shields by Ukraine's forces. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has called on Europe to send a strong signal to Ukraine. He did not confirm reports that he will be travelling to Kiev in the coming days.
Because at some point, when we have helped as much as possible to resist, and I wish that Ukraine will have won, and especially for the fighting to have stopped, we will have to negotiate. Ukrainian president and his leaders will have to negotiate with Russia, and we, Europeans, will be at the table bringing up the guarantees of security, the elements of which concerns our continent, and that is the reality of things.
The World Food Programme of the United Nations has suspended food aid to almost a third of the 6.2 million people in South Sudan, owing to a shortage in funds. It's partly another effect of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
The UN's World Food Programme said on Tuesday that it has suspended some food aid in South Sudan due to a funding shortfall, heightening the risk of starvation for 1.7 million people. Adeyinka Badejo-Sanogo, the WFP's acting country director, said South Sudan is facing its hungriest year since independence more than a decade ago.
We are particularly concerned with these cuts, especially because these cuts are happening at the start of the lean season, when families have completely exhausted any food reserves and are likely to continue to suffer acute levels of hunger as the lean season deepens. Essentially, WFP in South Sudan, we are in famine prevention mode.
The move suspends aid to almost a third of the 6.2 million people WFP had planned to assist this year. Globally, food prices have been soaring amid the conflict in Ukraine, leaving many humanitarian agencies with funding shortfalls. Badejo-Sanogo said $426 million is urgently required to cover needs for the next 6 months. The WFP said it had exhausted all options before suspending food assistance, including halving rations in 2021. More than 60% of South Sudan's population is grappling with severe hunger, a situation that is exacerbated by climate change and conflict.
England have suffered their worst home defeat since 1928 after falling to a 4-0 defeat against Hungary in the Nations League. Gareth Southgate's side are winless and at the bottom of their group under 12 months since reaching the Euro 2020 final. Gareth Southgate made 9 changes to the team that drew with Italy at the weekend in what was a must-win match to stay alive in the tournament. The hosts dominated possession early on at the Molineux Stadium in Wolverhampton. Southgate's side enjoyed 71% of possession in the first half and saw most of the ball after the restart as well. But
well, it's a chastening night. We've not lost many football matches, and when you lose so heavily at home, especially, but when you lose heavily with England, that's going to be very, very painful. So. Difficult night for the players. I feel for them because in the end, the 2 Hungary games in particular, I picked teams where I tried to balance the squad, give young players opportunities, and I didn't get the balance right to help them to be able to perform at the level that they needed to win those matches.
You can now move all of your WhatsApp backups across platforms, including from Android to iOS. Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg made the announcement. He says the feature is available for its beta users for now and will be fully rolled out in weeks. In a statement on Facebook, Zuckerberg said the transfer option was one of the top requested offers from users. Critics say the process is complicated and only works on new or factory reset phones and with iOS 15.5, while the previous device must be running Android 5 or above. The world's largest floating restaurant in Hong Kong is set to leave the city. The Jumbo site in Aberdeen was an iconic tourist destination, but is now set to relocate outside of the city because of financial difficulties. I'll leave you with that story. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Ollie Barrett. Do stay tuned to WION.
This is right, Arab.